Sixth reason why I do not believe in evolution is because there are barriers to hybridization. So the first question that comes up is, what is hybridization? Well, a hybrid from a standpoint of evolution is the offspring of two animals or plants of different breeds, varieties, species, genera, especially as produced through human manipulation for specific genetic characteristics. A more simplified definition for our discussion here is a hybrid is the offspring from two species. So let's take a look at one other definition, and that's the definition of a species. And we're going to skip the first definition and go down to the second one. The second one is the biology definition for species, and it says the major subdivision of a genus or subgenus regarded as the basic category of biological classification, composed of related individuals that resemble one another. Now listen very closely to the remainder of this definition. Are able to breed among themselves but are not able to breed with members of another species. So this definition tells us that that animals are only able to breed within their species. They're not able to breed outside of their species. However, as we just looked at the definition of hybrid, that's exactly what we're going to have. Is we're going to have animals which breed outside their species. So, does this prove evolution? No, I don't think so. I think what it proves is as we spoke earlier, is that, and one of the other reasons is that science has flaws. Science is fallible. And the means that they have of classifying and putting animals into species according to whether they can breed or not is flawed. It's fallible. It has problems. It has shortcomings. It doesn't prove evolution. The fact is, if they breed, they must be very, very closely related to one another. And the species things is just something that man has come up with as a science to try to categorize or classify the animals. So let's take a look at some of these hybrid type animals. And the first one we're going to take a look at is the mule or the henny, which is a cross between a horse and a donkey. If the horse involved was a female, and the donkey was the male, then the offspring, and if the offspring is a male, that male will be sterile. So he will be unable to continue the new hybrid species. If the offspring, however, is a female, this is rare, but it does happen, there is a 5% chance that the female can reproduce. So what you will have then in that 5% chance is that the female will have to mate again with either a horse or a donkey because the male is sterile. So the female has to mate with either a horse or a donkey. So the genetic makeup will then be go back more and more back into either the horse or the donkey, whatever they continue to mate with. In the case of the horse being a male and the donkey being a female, that offspring produced is called a henny. And once again, the male is sterile, is always sterile. And so he cannot continue to reproduce that type of species. The female, then, if she may or she may not be able to reproduce. But once again, the things that we said for the mule also apply for the henny. And that is, she's got to go back and mate with either a horse or a donkey because the male was incapable of reproducing. So this hybridization long term does not have much chance of success. So let's look at another hybrid, and that would be the liger. The liger is a cross between a lion and a tiger. It has existed only in captivity. And in the case of the liger, the female can be mated to either a tiger or a lion. But once again, you can't have a liger and a liger because the male is sterile. So once again, if that female mates, she's got to mate with a lion or a tiger, and the genetic makeup is going to begin to recede back into whatever she mates with. So the long-term outlook for this hybrid species, once again, is not good. Now, in the case of the Holpen is a cross between a bottlenose dolphin as the female, and the pilot whale is the male. And what we know about that is that the female can produce offspring, but we do not know about the male because so few instances of this have ever happened. In the case of, I'm going to mispronounce this, but Kamalu, she gave birth to 2 calves, and it was at the Tokyo SeaWorld. One of those lived only for a few days. Now, if you have an animal that only lives for a few days, they're not going to be able to reproduce. The other lived for 9 years. However, this is not a improved by natural selection type species, because the typical life expectancy of a bottlenose dolphin is 25 years. So this is not an improvement, and indeed it is not as strong an animal as the original animal was, or species was. Scientists predicted that this hybridization would be sterile, but they were once again incorrect. So the next hybrid we're going to look at is the Peasley, and that is a cross between a polar bear and a brown bear, and the offspring are fertile. And so to that I would say that perhaps the categorizations of science that should have these bears both in the same species rather than in separate species to satisfy the definition that we saw earlier, the biology definition of a species. But this does occur in the wild, and it does occur in captivity. To me, I don't get too excited about it because it's pretty much the same thing to me as 2 different breeds of dogs mating and having offspring together. So it certainly doesn't, impress me as being a proof for the argument of evolution. And then we have the mating of an Asian elephant with an African elephant. And this only has occurred one time as far as we know of. It happened at the Chester Zoo in England, and the calf only lived for 10 days. So, and this would appear to me to be a very close type 2 species, and yet it produced an inferior calf. That calf only lived for 10 days. So if the evolutionist wants to use hybridization as an argument that evolution is viable, then the hybridizations that we're looking at here certainly does not carry much strength, much weight as an argument for evolution. So when you have a hybridization, you will frequently have the offsprings are frequently sterile. They have much shorter life expectancies, which greatly reduces their chances of future generations reoccurring. Also, because animals are selective in nature, in some animals the male is the more selective. In other animals the female is more selective. But in all animals they tend to mate with other animals of their own kind. Another barrier to hybridization is that DNA incompatibility prevents the production of offspring in most cases where mating occurs outside of the species. So the laws of DNA say no to hybridization in most cases. And then the last barrier to hybridization we have is geography. Geography prevents some mating from occurring. Examples, the grizzly and the polar bear, which we saw earlier, are able to produce offspring, but their likelihood of being in the same geographical area is pretty slim. The seventh reason why I do not believe in evolution is that rarely do accidental events end with desirable results. This is the simplest and yet one of the most compelling arguments against the theory of evolution. The accidental events in my life and in the lives of others around me usually end with disastrous results. The evolutionist will tell you that natural selection is not an accidental occurrence, but I believe they need to be educate themselves to the definition of an accident. If an event occurs by chance without a deliberate plan, without an intelligent intervention, then it happens by accident. The marvelous design of even the simplest forms of life, be it plant or animal, give witness to the existence of an intelligent designer. You may tell me something insanely ridiculous like the designers came from outer space, but do not try to convince me that it all happened without any intelligent intervention whatsoever. It is altogether too wonderful and complicated and interdependent to just be an accident. The eighth reason why I do not believe in evolution is that the more complicated a system is, the greater the need for an intelligent design. I've worked in electronics for over 30 years and I've never heard an engineer say anything like, "We did not include that aspect into the design, but man, it sure turned out great. I'm so glad that it just happened." I have seen on numerous occasions that an aspect of the design was not intentionally considered and we had to modify the original design to compensate for the unfortunate oversight. As a matter of fact, I have seen months being spent on an element of the design that was overlooked, and they tried to compensate and overcome the timing problem that was caused by the oversight. So, but I've never heard an engineer say that we didn't take that into consideration, but it sure turned out great. Did your car just happen? Did your computer just happen? Did your body just happen? Did the air you breathe just happen? Did your ability to fight off diseases all just happen? Our brain is so complex that medical science does not fully understand how it functions. It has an amazing ability to not only store a huge amount of information, but it can also has the ability to access that information that you desire through a method of direct access. If I ask you for the date of your birth, you do not need to search a database. You immediately fetch that information through direct access. The greatest computers in the world cannot do that. They must go through a sequence of steps to find the location of the desired data. Evolution, in my opinion, is an arrogant insult to the intelligent person that designed the magnificent world in which we live. The ninth reason why I do not believe in evolution is that many complex systems are codependent upon each other for their successful operation and for their survival. Many very complicated systems would have had to evolve in sync with other very complicated systems if either of the systems were to be successful and survive. An example, when animals first evolved, they had to mutate from a non-blood possessing organism to a blood possessing organism. 2, a heart had to evolve at the same time as the ability to create blood. 3, the blood pressure regulation had to mutate in exactly the same generation as the ability to create blood and the heart to pump that blood. 4, the development of arteries and to carry the blood had to evolve in the same generation. 5, the lungs had to oxygenate the blood. 6, the filtering of the blood by the kidneys had to evolve in exactly the same generation. 7, blood coagulation had to evolve in the exact same generation, or the animal would bleed to death the first time it was wounded. 8, many other systems had to mutate in exactly the same generation to provide other necessities. The stomach system, the liver system, the gallbladder, the intestines, the pancreas, and the list goes on and on. The success of each individual system being codependent upon the success of many other systems. When you start looking at the functionality of the systems and the subsystems, then the millions of years excuse becomes the enemy of evolution and not its friend. These systems had to mutate at the same time. They did not have the luxury of waiting for 1,000,000 years for the next mutation to occur. This is in direct opposition to the idea that small changes occur gradually over long periods of time. This is so mathematically improbable that I believe we consider it to be an impossibility. The 10th reason why I do not believe in evolution is because evolution cannot explain how life began. Let's talk about reverse engineering for a little while. Reverse engineering is when a design which already exists is studied and disassembled into smaller components so that the design can be copied by someone other than the original designers. Let's say XYZ Incorporated wants to start making and selling a product that is already being sold by another company. They send someone to the store and purchase the widget from off the shelf. The widget is then carried to the laboratory of XYZ Incorporated, where their engineers disassemble and study the already existing product. Their goal is to reduce the design time and the cost to develop the product. The team at XYZ can be less skilled than the original team of designers because they are only copying the product, not designing it from scratch. It is always easier to reverse engineer something that already exists than to design and build something from the very beginning. And yet, with all the knowledge that science has, it has never been able to reverse engineer even the simplest forms of life and recreate something living from something non-living. They've never been able to take inorganic material and make organic material out of it. If the elementary life occurred from a series of evolutionary events, why has man never been able to reverse engineer what happened by accident? Why has the simplest forms of life never been initiated from scratch? With all this evolutionary knowledge that supposedly exists, why has life never been reverse engineered? The failure to reverse engineer life is why some evolutionists want to separate the origin of life from the evolution of life. They just want evolution to pertain to the changes in species once the initial life has occurred. Well, I have a number of problems with this approach, and I've listed them out here. The first problem I have with this approach is that if scientists had been able to recreate life from inorganic material, then they would have most certainly included it into the study of evolution. As a matter of fact, they would have been ecstatic because they had created life. They had created that which is living from that which is non-living. They would have most certainly included it into the study of evolution. As a matter of fact, it would be the cornerstone of their theory. And the second reason why I can't accept this approach is because you cannot go back millions of years and then abruptly stop because you're confused and do not know which direction to go in. And then the third reason I can't accept this approach is because Charles Darwin should have never titled his book The Origin of Species. He should have titled it Life After the Origin. And then lastly, the last problem that I have with this approach is that Charles Darwin avoided detailing the origins in his book, but made frequent statements referring to spontaneous generation. An example of that is he referred to the warm little pond. So the evolutionist doesn't like it because he can't explain it. He can't reverse engineer it. He doesn't understand where the origins of life comes from. And so he doesn't want to discuss that issue. He just wants to discuss the things that happened once that life began. But life had to have a beginning. It had to have a starting point. But the evolutionist does not really know what to do with that. If he did, he would create life from that which is non-living. The 11th reason why I do not believe in evolution is because humans all have 46 chromosomes, whereas apes all have 48 chromosomes. In the 1980s, evolutionists were arrogant about man having evolved from apes, but today that scenario is downplayed. It is downplayed because no one can explain why humans all have 46 chromosomes, while all four species of apes all have 48. If humans and apes evolved from the same lines, then why don't some apes have 46 chromosomes? Or conversely, why don't some humans have 48 chromosomes? Their answer is always the same, and that answer is only one mutation has survived with the passing of time. Really? In all the millions of years, are we going to use that one mutation survival answer yet again? Think of it. Here we supposedly have a mutation that is so powerful that it has defined every human on planet Earth. Likewise, that same mutation has defined every ape on the planet Earth. How magnificently powerful that mutation has proven to be. What success it has experienced. But by the way, it only happened one time. Is this the best explanation you have? It only happened one time? This seems so mathematically improbable and certainly is not supported by scientific data. It is, however, a great example of the science fiction that is so readily accepted by many people who are smart enough to know better. The 12th reason why I do not believe in evolution is because of mitochondrial Eve, the mother of all humans. DNA science has determined that every living man and every living woman on planet Earth all have one common mother in their ancestry. This determination was made by tracing the lineage using the inherited mitochondrial DNA of females. It was determined that this common mother probably lived in East Africa. Wow! This is the same location that biblical experts have claimed to be the home of Adam and Eve. The explanation given by the evolutionist is there may have been 10,000 women alive at the same time as Eve, but their DNA was not passed down through the generations. What they're saying is that there might have been 10,000 women alive at the same time, but they, or their heirs, all died without leaving a trace of mitochondrial existence behind. Wow, that was close. If Eve had not survived but had deceased like all the other 10,000 humans on planet Earth would not exist today. It also is amazing that this mutation sequence has not happened again, creating a second line of mitochondrial DNA. Sounds incredibly impossible, doesn't it? Only 1 out of 10,000 women survived, and the mutation process never happened again. The human race came oh so close to extinction. And by the way, they're going to use the same excuse for there only having been one father of the whole human race whenever we discuss that topic next in Reason 13. The 13th reason why I do not believe in evolution is because of Y-chromosomal Adam, the father of all humans. Scientists have determined by studying the Y chromosome that is passed from father to son that every living man and every living woman on planet Earth all have one common father in their ancestry. Initial dating, which I have no confidence in, by the way, provided 5 different periods in which Adam may have lived. But dating, however, in the year 2013 revealed that Adam probably lived in the same time period as Eve. Wow, these guys are really smart. They figured out that it takes a man and a woman alive at the same time to produce a baby. They've also determined that Adam and Eve both came from Africa. Wow, amazed again. Once again, like with Eve, it is incredible that only one male ancestor survived the cataclysmic events that destroyed all other males. Like with Eve, it is also strange that the mutation sequence has not occurred a second time. Wow, once again, the human race came so close to extinction. The 14th reason why I do not believe in evolution is because we have an endangered species list, but we do not have a new species list. I realize that new mutations allegedly take millions of years to occur, but in light of what we see happening around us in the current time frame, it appears that the number of species is declining. The species count is not increasing. If this has always happened, then the maximum number of species occurred at the time of creation and has been decreasing ever since. If natural selection is the god of all life, then it seems to me that it would be producing the highest number of new species ever, because over millions and millions of years the highest number of species would exist today, and thereby give more opportunities for a more rampant creation of new species. But that is not what we see. What the fossil record tells us is that species have become extinct over time. Wow, I suppose that natural selection is not as powerful today as it has been over the past millions upon millions of years.